the next two presentations.
Good morning, everyone. So Larry Stevens will come up to report out on our findings from the 2016 exports report. And, this speaks directly to Arthur's point that is we're considering the impacts of the additional materials that'll be banned by China for imports. We're going to have to take deeper dives into information that comes out of our exports reports, and also in the report that Karen's going to come up and report out on after Larry, which is our state of recycling and disposal report. So we'll have more discussions about the China ban in the future and figuring out, how we can look at our current initiatives and our future ones to address some of the changes in the commodity stream.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Can you hear me? Yes. Amen. Very good. My name is Larry Stevens. I'm from the Knowledge and Integration section of the Policy Office, and I'm here to present the 2016 California Exports of Recycled Materials report. First, I would like to thank my team, Eileen Nathaniel and Mark Umphreys, for all the assistance they gave in putting this report together, and also the rest of the entire Knowledge and Integration section. I do ask that you please hold all your questions till after the second presentation, which comes up after me, and you will have an opportunity to ask the questions at that time. Today, we'll be looking at the 2016 Recyclable Exports Report, finding out where we get the data from, the sources and limitations of the data, and we'll mention several of the individual export materials. We will make a summary of the information and give some future topics to research. In this presentation, and in the accompanying report found on the CalRecycle's website, in the publication site, and on the 75% initiative page, we look primarily at the exports of recyclables from California seaports. The reason to focus on the seaborne export data is because it's readily tracked and more available. The report presents information on exports exiting from California ports, regardless of their state of origin. The U.S. Central Bureau tracks and reports the vessel weights, the values, and the destinations of materials sent out of California ports. CalRecycle assesses this data through the Wires of Trade database. There is some information on truck, rail, and air exports, and those are included, but we focus mainly on seaport export data. Here we show that California exported close to 15 million tons of recycled materials in 2016. These recyclables had a vessel value of $4.6 billion. This chart here shows that in the blue section that 24% of all materials shipped from California ports were recyclables. As stated in the last slide, California exported those 15 million tons of recyclable materials in 2016. Now this chart shows a breakdown of the destination countries where the recyclables were shipped by sea. The area in blue shows that most of the exported materials by weight went to China, about 62%. The area in red represents Korea, which had 11%, and the area in green, Taiwan, 10%. China, Korea, and Taiwan, these countries made up 83% of all the recycled materials by weight. You can see that almost 90% of California recyclables go to these Asian markets. This next chart shows the breakdown of recycled materials that shipped out of California ports. The blue area shows that mixed paper, cardboard, and paperboard was about 59% of 15 million tons of seaborne exports by weight. This material made up the largest category of recyclable materials. The red area shows that ferrous metals was 26%, and the green area's non-ferrous metals is 6%. The yellow and the purple area combined shows that plastics made up 6% of the total tonnage shipped out of California by sea. This chart shows that the breakdown of recycled materials by vessel value that shipped out of California ports. The green area is non-ferrous metal at 38% of the $4.6 billion of the vessel value. Now, this material made up the largest category of recycled materials. The blue area shows that mixed paper and cardboard and paperboard was at 27%. The red area shows that ferrous metals was 24%. The yellow and purple area combined shows that plastics made up 6% of the total tonnage. As you may notice, mixed paper has less value than non-ferrous metals. This is a reversal from the last slide, which showed that a lot of mixed paper tonnage was shipped from California ports, but the value was low. So that's why non-ferrous metals are usually more valuable than mixed paper. Here we have a trend chart over the years from 1998 to 2016. This shows the total tons of recycled materials shipped to various countries over time. We can see that an overall decline of tons being exported by destination from California, which started about 2011. This decline has been a steady decline downward. Compared to 2015, export tonnage of recyclables was down about 9% and 2 million tons by weight last year. The majority of the increases and decreases over time has been largely due to changes in the amounts of exports to China, Korea, and Taiwan. You also can see that China, shown by the blue bars, declined about 9% from 2015 to 2016. The vessel values of the recyclable exports follow the same downward trend as the tonnage amounts. On here, we'll take a look at a few of the individual commodities. Information about the individual commodities can be found in the 2016 California Exports Materials Report, once again found on the CalRecycle website, in the Pubs Department section, and also in the 75% Initiative page. Here you will find detailed information about a number of individual materials, such as paper, plastic, ferrous, and non-ferrous materials, and a few other ones. Information such as mixed paper was the largest tonnage amounts, and the ferrous and non-ferrous metals had the highest vessel values for the materials exported out of California ports. The 2016 report will show that most of the individual materials have been declining in tonnage and vessel value when you compare it with the 2015 amounts. But yet, still China continues to receive the majority of California recyclable exports from our ports. In summary, we need to pay attention to recyclable exports that have been leaving our ports. They play a role, and a large role, in California's recycling efforts. About 15 million tons of recycled materials left our California ports in 2016. This was 24% of all California exports by sea. This material had a vessel value of nearly $4.6 billion. We'd also notice that China received 62% of all recyclables. That's a large portion. And China, Korea, Taiwan together received 83% by weight. And then finally, we have seen a decline in the amounts of recyclables since 2011. And last year, that decline was about 2 million tons. CalRecycle will possibly and most likely deliver a second exports report sometime later this year. The plan is to explore some of the unanswered questions that were generated by the data later in the year. Topics such as why are there large increases or decreases in individual commodities? What's the final end use of some of these exported recyclables? Yes, we have good vessel value and vessel weight information on most of the materials, but not a good handle on truck and rail information. We also do not know how much material is shipped from other states to leave from our ports or just moves through our state. We also hope that information from the AB 901 recycling report will help provide information on the movement of exported materials. We're also planning for the next year, in reference to what was said earlier, the question was asked, we are going to take a look and try to track some of the information that comes about materials that are being banned by China. What are we going to do with that material? Slide 12. This data here is my contact information. If you have any information that will help us discover some of this missing data, please help us by contacting the Policy Office Knowledge Integration Section and myself at 916-341-6241. Thank you. Remember to please hold your questions till the next report. Thank you.
Thanks, Larry. Karen Morrison was coming up to report out on the State of Recycling and Disposal report.
Good morning. Good morning. So as Zoe mentioned, this is our annual report on disposal and recycling rates for calendar year 2016. We've done a couple of things slightly differently this year compared to past year report outs. First, we're pairing this with the release of our annual State of Disposal and Recycling report, which is available online and has a discussion in greater detail about some of the topics I'm going to discuss today. We're also choosing to focus on the data as it relates to our AB 341 goals, which is 75% recycling, source reduction, and composting by the year 2020. So in light of that, the AB 341 requirement has slightly different definitions about what constitutes recycling and disposal than some of our other targets. So I just want to briefly review the categories that I'm going to be talking about today. For the purposes of this goal, the only activities that count positively toward the goal are source reduction, recycling, and composting, which means that most other activities are either disposal, so directly into landfills or exported from the state for disposal, or disposal-related activities such as alternative daily cover, AIC, other beneficial reuse, waste hire-derived fuel, and transformation. So as we analyze our progress towards 75%, I'm going to start by breaking out traditional disposal from disposal-related activities. This graph shows our traditional landfill disposal since 1989. And in 2016, we saw 35.2 million tons of material go to landfill in California. This is an increase of 2 million tons relative to 2015 and is the fourth consecutive year of increases. We've also not seen any significant decreases in our landfill disposal since 2009. For disposal-related activities, there's a total of 7.5 million tons of material managed through one of these 5 categories in 2016, which is up 350,000 tons relative to 2015. This is primarily driven by increases in other beneficial reuse. The remaining categories were relatively stable year over year. So taken together, of looking at our landfill disposal in blue and disposal-related activities in red, our total amount of disposal and disposal-related was 42.7 million tons in 2016, which has grown considerably since this goal was enacted in 2011. We can then calculate our average per capita disposal rate by taking into account population for each given year, and found that our total per capita disposal for 2016 was 6.0 pounds per person per day, which is up from 5.7 pounds per person per day in 2015. And as a reminder, our target under AB 341 is 2.7 pounds per person per day. So we can use this data to calculate our recycling rate for 2016, which was 44%. This is down from 47% in 2015 and 50% in 2014. And again, our target for 2020 is 75%. So as a part of evaluating our goal, we've developed projections to try to understand what would a business as usual scenario look like for disposal, and then how much additional diversion would we need to do in order to make our goal. So one projection that we've used for this is taking 10 years of data for disposal and calculating the average over that 10-year period, and then projecting out based on population growth through 2030. Using that projection, we find that in 2020 we need to dispose an additional, or divert, an additional 24 million tons from landfills. But I do want to note that if disposal continues to increase at the rate that we've seen in recent years, we will need to divert even more material than that. So as disposal continues to increase, it's really critical for the department to consider what our next steps are. What are the forces that contribute to this trend? What are we doing in our current programs to try to address this? And what are new programs, tools, and goals that we can look at implementing in order to achieve the 75% goal? So in our analysis of trends, we identified 4 major contributors, although this is certainly not exhaustive. First, disposal costs in California are relatively low compared to other states and countries, and that this likely creates an economic driver toward disposal rather than recycling. Second, we see that numerous economic indicators that are linked to disposal, such as increases in wages and growth in construction, are increasing. And so this is concerning for that being a continued driver for additional disposal. Third, we know that recyclable markets have been slow to develop domestically and are declining, as we've already discussed, internationally. And so we have to have markets to convert this material for recycling to be successful within the state. Finally, we know that we have insufficient in-state infrastructure to handle all organics that are generated within the state, and that this is compounded by closures of biomass facilities as well as changes in procurement requirements that may be displacing urban material from that management. So I want to emphasize that we don't know the extent to which any of these factors are contributing to the increases in disposal, but we will continue to monitor these going forward. And for CalRecycle to meet its goals, it's necessary for the department to identify and implement new tools to address these factors. So there are several programs that are currently underway to try to increase the statewide recycling rate. And I want to focus on two here, which are mandatory commercial recycling and mandatory commercial organics recycling. These two programs target the commercial and multifamily disposal streams, which account for 3/4 of our disposed waste in California. Both require businesses and multifamily residences to arrange for recycling services, either for general recyclables or for organics. Mandatory commercial recycling was enacted in 2011 and went online in 2013. And we've seen that jurisdictions are working to implement this statute and that businesses are changing their practices in order to do more recycling. However, and I should also add that mandatory commercial organics recycling just started its implementation in 2016, and we're still continuing to bring more businesses in under that law. What I do want to emphasize with these programs is even as they are being adopted within the state, these efforts have not been sufficient to decrease disposal or to change the trends that we've been seeing. So we're really looking to new methods that require specific or mandatory action from local jurisdictions, the waste industry, waste generators, the state, product manufacturers, and others to try to increase diversion from landfills and convert that material into new products. The accompanying state of disposal and state of recycling report have a lengthy list of options that we are and others may consider moving forward, but I want to highlight two here, which is our expanded organics program and packaging reform. SB 1383, as many of you are well aware, was a major piece of legislation that passed last year that deals with, or that creates new goals for the department to divert organic material from landfills by 2020 and 2025. As organics comprise up to 2/3 of the disposed waste stream, this is a significant target and a significant new tool for us moving forward. CalRecycle is currently engaged in an informal regulatory process to implement this statute, but I want to emphasize that it creates stronger requirements for jurisdictions, the state, and waste generators than what we've seen in some of our other programs. And this will be reflected in regulations in order to achieve the targets that are set in this statute. Beyond those stronger requirements, we're also aware that significant public and private investments will be needed, both for the development of infrastructure and for markets in order to handle this material. So CalRecycle's next round of workshops starts tomorrow in Sacramento, and we appreciate your continued engagement on this issue. The second major new program that we're looking at is broader packaging reform. We estimate that packaging comprises roughly 1/4 of the disposed waste stream, and we've been engaged in a public process since 2013 to address this material. This has relied primarily on voluntary efforts, but in September of last year, staff were directed to develop a comprehensive, statewide, mandatory approach to managing packaging, and one that is guided by an extensive stakeholder process in order to create that policy recommendation. And we anticipate another public workshop on this later in the fall. So these two efforts, in combination with the others that are listed within the report, CalRecycle hopes that this will assist us in reaching the 75% statewide recycling goal. So California overall has made significant strides in recycling over the last 30 years, but there's still more to do as landfill waste continues to increase. So to summarize, our 2016 data was 42.7 million tons of disposal and disposal-related activities, which corresponds to a per capita disposal rate of 6 pounds per person per day and a recycling rate of 44%. And our 2020 goals are in contrast in green on this slide. So moving forward, we will continue to monitor the disposed waste stream with our waste characterization studies, and we'll begin receiving reporting from recycling facilities under AB 901 in 2019. Although the increase in disposal has slowed the state's continued progress, we're confident that improvements are still possible as we work to focus and commit on our goals of reducing waste through our new programs. Some more information about California's statewide disposal, diversion, and recycling rates is available on our website at the first link listed, as well as our 2017 State of Disposal and State of Recycling report. And with that, we're happy to take any questions, either on this or on the exports report.
Good morning, Nick Lapis with Californians Against Waste. This is obviously sobering information. It's not a surprise, I think, to most of us, but actually seeing the numbers up there, and the chart that always gets me is the one that shows where we are and where we need to go. Not exactly sure where to start on this. I did want to talk a little bit about our existing programs and the enforcement of those laws that are already on the books. As you mentioned, we have AB 341, we have AB 1826, both of which have mandates on businesses that at least anecdotally don't seem to be enforced completely around the state. I think we would be, I think most people would agree that not every single business that's covered under those laws currently has the service they're required to have. And I know you don't have as much explicit authority to fine people as you will under 1383, but at the same time, you do have authority under the AB 939 process to enforce against jurisdictions that are not meeting that legislation. And so I'm wondering how that enforcement process is coming along. Is that public information in terms of which jurisdictions are currently either under the LAMD enforcement process, quote unquote enforcement process, or the official enforcement process under Mark DeBee's shop? I think it'd be helpful if we could get active information in terms of, we know that, jurisdictions are having a hard time complying, and we're working with X number of jurisdictions, because at least from an outsider perspective, it seems like many people are completely ignoring the laws and are not being enforced. That's my first question, but if you could respond, yeah.
I'll start. This is Howard Levinson, and I'll start, and then George Ann Turner will complement what I say. So first of all, Nick, I think we're all on the same page with respect to the need for enforcement on this. The laws as they're structured only allow us to look at whether jurisdictions are carrying out education, outreach, and monitoring, and enforcement on the part of the jurisdictions against the businesses is purely voluntary. So that's certainly a function of the structure of the law, and I think it's something that we recognize as we move forward with the 1383 regulations, that those are the kinds of things we need to address. But within those parameters, what we have done, and I will forget the month, I believe it was March, we did bring forth, we identified 36 jurisdictions that had gaps in the mandatory commercial recycling implementation, and we notified those jurisdictions. About 24 of those then did respond with improvements, at least in their planned programs. There were 10 or so, and I'm probably getting my numbers a little off, but there were 10 that we then referred in that item over to the jurisdiction compliance unit in Mark DeBee's shop, and those are now currently under George's umbrella for further investigation.
So, Nick, the details about the specific enforcement actions are still not public knowledge, but those are getting closed up. We have 10 of those jurisdictions that were referred to us, and we're closing out those investigations kind of as we speak. So I think in the next couple months, you'll see some notifications of that, and those that are ripe for a compliance order will be, on the public noticing. So at that point, you'll have a sense of where those are at. I think just to kind of remind, and I think just to echo what Howard's saying, is that the enforcement on this is challenging, and it does go back to good faith effort. And so it's not something that, it's did you check the box kind of thing. So it takes a certain amount of analysis and depth of review.
Are you publicly publishing which jurisdictions are in which category? And for what?
Well, the March item listed all of the potential ones that could have gotten referred to us, and the actual 10 that did get referred to us is in that, and it is public. And certainly if you have trouble finding that, I'm happy to direct you there.
And I'll add that certainly if anyone has information that indicates programs aren't being implemented, for sure we want to know about that so we can then follow up. The 1826 program, the mandatory commercial organics recycling, as you know, as Karen said, just started in 2016. So we just got the first annual report on that 10 days ago. And so we'll be going through that, looking for information on program implementation, also based on staff visits and other information. And we could bring forth some jurisdictions under the same kind of pathway. The other thing I want to mention is that in January of this year, Scott, Director Smithline, sent out a letter to all jurisdictions indicating that under both AB 341 for mandatory commercial and under 1826 for mandatory organics, we can bring a jurisdiction up for review at any time based on failure to implement some aspect of those programs. And so we are looking for those kinds of instances.
So you mentioned that if people are aware of jurisdictions that are not implementing the requirements, they can contact you, I assume. Is there an official mechanism? Is there an email address for complaints? Do you have a form somewhere on the website? I think I know the answer to the question. So
I know you do.
If you could create something along those lines, I think it would be helpful.
We have a department-wide, someone correct me if I'm wrong, we have a department-wide 1-800 number, although I'm not sure it's actually 1-800, that you can call. I think it's pretty well publicized. I think it's mostly used with respect to the beverage container program, but it's not limited to that. And so we could take any complaint through that mechanism and it would get funneled to the right individual within the department.
That is helpful. If you could also set up some kind of online way for people to submit information. I mean, I just think it's obvious that we need to take a more active role, and just judging by a number of people who call our organization complaining about the fact that they don't have recycling in their apartment building, they don't have recycling in their school, et cetera, I think you would get a decent number of people submitting complaints. And then switching gears a little bit, it might also make sense to go back and revisit your existing legislation in addition to 341-1826 to see if there's opportunities for more enforcement and maybe even reopening some of those regulations. RPPC comes to mind. The rules, when written, were obviously heavily fought over. They could have been stronger. I know that you guys have a page on your website where you list the enforcement under RPPC. There's nothing posted after 2012. I'm guessing just whoever was updating that page hasn't updated it. But re-looking at RPPC and some of the other programs to see if there's an opportunity for decreasing that, that packaging material might be another opportunity as well.
With respect to RPPC, there's really a two-track approach. I mean, one is we're actively pursuing enforcement on RPPC right now. So I don't really, we'll have to take a look at that webpage. I'm not sure what it refers to or if we've been remiss in updating it. We'll find out what's going on there. But we're absolutely moving ahead with that. The statute is old. The regs are now somewhat old. There's a lot of difficulty with applying RPPC to the sort of current suite of packaging particularly composite packaging, other type of packaging that exists now, and determining how it or whether it falls within the RPPC. But we're actually very engaged in that process right now. The second track with RPPC is that, as has been mentioned, we're obviously undergoing a broad packaging reform effort. And so before we make any specific changes to RPPC, we would probably do that in conjunction with some recommendation as a result of the broader packaging reform effort.
And that's a very appropriate place for it. And, you know, you have some pretty clear authority under that bill, and I don't think you're utilizing your full authority. And the regulations as written don't utilize your full authority. And then finally, on the export information, I think those reports are incredibly helpful. Thank you for doing those. The question at the very end of what else would be helpful, you know, I think the disconnect for me at least is between the tons exported and what actually ends up happening to material at a MRF. Are these bales now going to markets in California or somewhere else in the US? Is material not being pulled off of lines? Are lines at MRFs actually shut down that are processing maybe lower quality material? And I think that part of it would be really interesting. And maybe even how's that translated going back to the curb? Are there communities that are now no longer accepting certain grades of plastic, for example, or something like that? So I know it's a big research project, but even anecdotal survey information would be helpful.
Well, I'm pretty bullish that we're going to be able to answer these questions better once we implement AB 901. We'll have a much better handle on these really critical issues about what's happening with this material. I mean, as you know, it was just a couple of years ago that we worked with stakeholders to sort of negotiate a process forward with AB 901 to implement the subsection of statute that was already on the books that gave us the authority to track recyclables. So, we're in the regulatory process now. So hopefully there won't be any delay and we'll have that information.
I mean, I just think anecdotally, I've been to MRFs where I've seen, say, the mixed waste paper line shut down because the markets are bad for mixed waste paper. And I think that part of it, and I don't know how widespread that is at any given point, that part of it is really important, I think, for the policy-making side of things.
Additional answer to your question, that is possible why we're going to possibly do a second report. Those are some type of questions that we will try to answer over the next 6-8 months.
Heidi, come on up.
Good morning. I'm Heidi Sanborn with the California Product Stewardship Council. We're actually celebrating our 10th anniversary this year, and we wish we would have gotten a little bit further along the road for producer responsibility, but I think this report actually makes the case that we really actually need to go there. And we do agree with Nick that this trend is very concerning, but we might believe that the enforcement on local governments while the producers continue to sell products that are not designed for recycling or the environment is fundamentally unfair. We have a system problem, and all parties in the system are going to be needed to reduce the waste disposed of in California. According to the AB 341 report to the legislature, one of the issues brought up was the need to look at producer responsibility for hazardous waste to save a lot of money for local governments that could then be used for composting, used for a lot of other things. And I would like to remind everybody that we really need to make this industry safer. We have needle sticks. This is costing a lot of money for the haulers and the local governments, and not to mention the terror these people feel when they've been stuck with not only a needle that's been in the trash, but a needle that they have no idea where it came from. Drugs, gas cylinders, lithium batteries, all these things are causing fires. They're having fires that are costing millions of dollars in damage, and now they're not even sure if they can get insurance for some of our MRFs. These things add to our costs in the system, and then we cannot spend that money on diversion and doing things at the back end. So we need the industries at the front end to help. So EPR for large volume products and an EPR framework is what was recommended in the report to the legislature. And we strongly believe we need to get to the source of the waste problem for product waste in particular, and that is the producer. They make the decisions in the design that will decide the durability, the repairability, and the recyclability of the product. If they have no skin in the game, we cannot solve this problem, and I think these numbers are bearing that out. So we think it's really critical that the legislature pass bills that are getting to the source of the problem. We've got to turn the spigot off. So bills like AB 1158 trying to fix the carpet program, a very large ticket item that's up to 2% of the waste stream all by itself, can make a dent in getting us towards our 75% and beyond goals. So we just want to put it out there. We support you're making this public. We thank you for all the work you've done, and we look forward to working with you next year in the legislature to solve these problems. Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. Evan.
Good morning. Thank you. I have a new hotline, 1-800-GOT-COMPOST. It'll be up soon. We commend CalRecycle for the report today. It's great information to have to set policy for the future, and this type of information we need. I know 901 will come on soon, but that's not till 2019, and information won't be around till 2020. I don't think we can wait for 901. I think we have to act now. Anecdotally, we saw the export market go down 7 million tons over the last 5 years. We've seen disposal go up 6 million tons over the last 5 years. And we see the green fence getting higher and disposal getting higher too. So those anecdotal evidence needs to be discussed further. A lot of information today. We had a good exchange. I support everything that Heidi and Nick said today, but this deserves a lot more attention. You guys have a lot of information here, a lot of trends, a lot of good programs you have with 1383 coming with shared responsibility. I believe this needs to be like a fall agenda item maybe with a second export report. Bring this back for the fall of 2017 to set a legislative agenda for 2018 because I believe we need a lot more attention here. Under the slide of next steps, you had some new program tools and goals. 3 things need to be added to that. I think Heidi talked about extended producer responsibility. That's key. Another one that we've been working on is called Build Infrastructure Now. This kind of comes out of RMDZ program, Frank Farrell and Company. That's been shelved for the last couple of years. But with the export market in China keeping the bales at home, we need to have remanufacturing here. I believe that the Build Infrastructure Now and remanufacturing the product domestically deserves more attention. And finally, the biggest one is tip fee reform. I believe that the landfills being stuck at $1.40 a ton since 1993 has led to cheaper landfills. And that's what's part of the AB 1341 report with regards to cheap disposal going up. So it's great information here. We have a big lift together. I think we have a new shared responsibility coming 1383, and then now's the time to act. So coming back in the fall time with an extended workshop on this information will be timely for 2018. Thank you.
Thank you, Evan. Anyone else?